Hi, I'm Jayne from Poppy Patchwork, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to make a 12-inch block called Honeymoon. For this you're going to need 4 2.5-inch squares in background fabric, 4 3.5-inch squares in background fabric, and 2 6.25-inch squares. In fabric A you're going to need 1 4.5-inch square, 4 3.5-inch squares and 4 2.5-inch squares. These are not pictured. And in fabric B you're going to need 2 6.25-inch squares. Now when I was calculating what we needed for this block, I had a bit of a moment, so as we go through the video you may see me cutting up pieces of fabric that are much bigger than I have stated here, or more fabrics than I've stated here, but these are the correct fabric requirements for this block. I've designed this quilt block notebook which I use when I'm planning out the blocks that I'm going to do videos for, and you may find it useful. You can buy it from Amazon, and if you scan this code using your phone it'll take you straight to the Amazon page for it. Now let's get quilting. So the first thing we're going to do is make the half square triangles, and for this you need the 3 3/4-inch squares in background fabric and fabric A. We'll begin by drawing a diagonal line on the wrong side of the background fabrics. So this is a line across the diagonal, corner to corner. And for this I start in the middle and draw out to one of the corners, then go back to the middle and draw to the other corner, and that just stops the fabric from dragging. I'm going to repeat that on all of these. And now we're going to pin them right sides together to the fabric A. When I take these to the sewing machine, I'm going to line the edge of the 1/4-inch foot up against the line, and I'm going to sew 2 lines of stitching 1/4 inch away from either side of the line. Back at the cutting board, I'm going to take the pins out. And now I'm going to cut along the drawn line. So now we need to trim these. So I'm going to just check in my book what size we're trimming these to. So these are going to be trimmed to 2.5 inches. So there's 2 ways of doing this. I'm going to show you first of all with a square ruler, and for this one we need to press our seams to one side. So I'm going to finger press the seams to the dark side, and then with this seam roller I'm just going to run that over the seam. And with this you take the ruler and you line the diagonal line on that stitched line on the seam, and you line the bottom and the left edges at just over 2.5 inches. So I'm going to line that diagonal line up, and the bottom line is just over 2.5 inches, and so is the left side. And I'm going to cut along the right and the top side. Now I'm going to turn this 180 degrees, and I'm going to line that diagonal line on the ruler up with the seam line, and then the bottom edge and the left edge need to be lined up at exactly 2.5 inches. Then I'm going to cut up the right and along the top. I'll just take my scissors to that did come off. So there is your 2.5 inch half square triangle. Now I prefer to use the Quilt in a Day ruler. This is the 6.5 inch triangle square up ruler. And for this I don't need to press my blocks first. And I just line the 2.5 inch line on the ruler along the stitch line. And then I cut up and down the sides of the ruler. So I'm going to do the rest of those like that. I'm going to put those to one side, and now I'm going to work on the quarter square triangles. So for this we're going to need the large pieces. These were cut at 6.25 inches. So on the reverse side of the background fabric I'm going to draw a line across the diagonal. I'm going to do that on all of them. And to make the quarter square triangles, initially you start by making half square triangles. So matching the background fabric up with the fabric B's, and popping a pin in the corners. And as I did before, when I take this over to the sewing machine, I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam on both sides of that drawn line. So I'm going to take those over to the sewing machine now. I'm going to snip between these and sew down on the other side of the drawn line. So now we're going to go back to the cutting mat. So we're going to remove the pins, and then we're going to cut along the drawn line. So now we're going to press our seams to the darker side. So for this you set your seam and then you press it towards the darker fabrics. I'm going to do that with all of them now. So now that they're pressed, we need to draw a diagonal line on the wrong side of 4 of these units. So when you're drawing your diagonal line, it needs to cross over the stitch line. So lay your stitch line horizontal and then draw a vertical line across the diagonal. So now lay the unmarked one of the half square triangles with the marked half square triangle, and we are going to be butting the seams together, and we're going to lay the fabric so that the background fabric lays on top of the printed fabric, and then the printed fabric lays on top of the background fabric. And because we press those seams in opposite directions, they should butt up nicely together. And once you've got that positioned, then you just pop a pin to keep it in place. So again, you're going to take those back to the sewing machine and sew 1/4 inch away from that drawn line on both sides of the drawn line. So I'm going to snip between these and then sew down on the other side of the drawn line. So now we're going to go back to the cutting board. So we're going to start by removing the pins. And so we're going to cut these along that drawn line. I'm just going to have a look to see what these need to be trimmed to. So these need to be trimmed to 4.5 inch square. So I'll show you how to do this with the standard square ruler. So we're going to press those seams. I think I'll press these seams open for a flatter finish. So we've got the standard square ruler and we've got our piece, and what we need to do is line that diagonal line across the one of those stitch lines, and then the intersection here needs to cross at 2.25. 2.25 is half of 4.5. So I need to find 2 1/4. 2 1/4 is there. So I've lined the diagonal line on the seam line. Then on the other seam line, that intersection is lined at 2 1/4. And now I'm going to trim up the right and along the top. I'm now going to rotate that 180 degrees and repeat the process. So I'm lining the 2 1/4 inch line at the intersection and the diagonal line along the seam line, and you can check that it's correct because the bottom and the left edges will now be at 4.5. So I'm just going to cut up and across the top. So that's how you trim with a standard square ruler, and I prefer to trim with my Quilt in a Day 6.5 inch square ruler. So for this, again, you don't need to press them in any direction. What you do is you line your 4.5 inch seam line along the bottom here, and then this ruler has a line that runs down the vertical, and you line that up with your stitching line here, and now you simply cut up and down. And now these pieces can be pressed. I'm going to press these seams open. So I'm going to set the seams, and then I'm going to press them open on the wrong side of the block. And then from the front of the block. Now I made too many of these. I only needed to make 4. So as I said at the beginning of the video, I did amend the requirements that I stated are correct at the beginning of this video, and you just need to make 4 of these, not 8. So I'm only going to press 4 of them, and I'll put the other 4 to one side. Now what we need to do is lay them out in the block layout, but I haven't pressed my half square triangles, so I'm just going to have a look at the book to see which way I want to press these. So I think I'm going to press these to the dark fabric. So now we're going to lay these out in the block layout, and I'm going to refer to the book for this. Okay, so I said earlier in the video I must have been having a moment when I was working out the fabric requirements for this block, and you can see I have actually forgotten to cut the squares that go in here. If I look back at the diagram in my notebook, I can see that these should be the A fabric, so I'm just going to cut out 4 more pieces that are 2.5 inch square. So once I've done that, I'll show you the block layout. So I've now cut out those missing 2.5 inch squares, and now I'm going to start joining the block together. And I'm going to do this first by joining these. Doesn't really matter which way you do it, but I'll probably join them like this. So we're just going to make little 4 patches at the corners. So I'm going to take these over to the sewing machine and sew them together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So we're going to sew these with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and where I can, I'm going to put the bulky seam and sew that at the end of the seam. So sew towards the bulky end. So now we're going to go back to the block layout. So now I'm going to press those pieces, and I'm going to press the seams towards the 2.5 inch square. So I'm going to set the seams and then press. And now we're going to return these to the block layout. Okay, so they're back on the block layout. Bring them down into view. And now I'm going to complete those little 4 patches by matching the seams together. These will butt together. I'm going to pop a pin in here and then one at either end. So I'm going to take these back over to the sewing machine and sew with the 1/4 inch seam. I'm now going to press those seams open. Now we're going to go back to the block layout. So now we're going to sew these together in columns. So I'm going to return these to the block layout, but I'm not going to press them yet. Now I'm going to pin the bottoms onto these columns. We'll go back to the block layout now. So we're back at the block layout and need to decide how we're going to press these seams. So we want the points here to match. So because of that reason, I'm going to press the seams open. So I'm going to set the seams and press them open on the back of the strips and then turn them around and press them open from the front. Okay, so back in block layout, I'm now going to join these two together. And I'm going to make sure that those points match up. And I do have a video on getting perfect points. And if you right click on the link above, it will open this up in a new window for you. So I'll take that over to the sewing machine and sew with a 1/4 inch seam. Now we're going to repeat on the other side. And now we're going to sew the last seam. And now we're going to press all the seams open for a flatter finish. Congratulations, you have made the Honeymoon block. Here are some quilt options. This is an illustration of the quilt repeating the same block. There is no sashing or borders, but the use of the white background fabric in the block allows the design and fabrics to stand out. This is an illustration of the quilt repeating the same block placed on point. There is no sashing or borders, but you would need to add blocks in background fabric in between the blocks, shown here with the stars, and add setting triangles around the edges, again shown here with the stars. This is an illustration of the quilt repeating the same block but with sashing, cornerstones and borders. And finally, this is an illustration of a sampler quilt using some of the blocks from this quilt block series. The sashing in this quilt is in the white background fabric. The cornerstones and border is in a darker fabric to pop and frame the quilt. Want to learn more? Watch another one of my videos from the quilt block series. Click above to go to my playlist. I hope you liked this video. Please like and subscribe to my channel. More of these videos will be posted, so please tune in. Thank you for watching and bye for now.